In this video, I'm going to talk about dividing fractions. And since dividing fractions is based on multiplying fractions, if you haven't gone through the video on multiplying fractions yet, please do that now. Before we talk about the procedure, we need to talk about what a reciprocal is. And the reciprocal of a number is a second number, which when multiplied to the first gives a product of 1. For instance, the reciprocal of 3/2 is 2/3, because if you multiply 3/2 and 2/3 together, the product is a 1. To find the reciprocal of -7, we think of this as -7 over 1. So the reciprocal would be -1 over 7. And again, if we multiply these together, we get a positive 1 as a result. Notice the reciprocal of a negative number has to be negative itself, so that when we multiply the two negatives, the result is positive. Well, with that in mind, the procedure for dividing fractions is you multiply the fraction in the numerator by the reciprocal of the fraction in the denominator. And before we start problems, I kind of want to talk about why this is true, because for a lot of students this is kind of like a magic trick, and it's really not. It comes back to that single idea which is behind most of what we do with fractions, and that's multiplication by 1. So let's start with 6/5 divided by 3/10. And notice how this division bar is a little bigger than the others. That's how we tell people which value is in the numerator and which is in the denominator. Now I'm going to multiply this fraction by 1. But I'm going to pick a very special form of 1, and that's 10/3 divided by 10/3. Again, here's the larger division bar, and so this is the numerator and this is the denominator. And 10/3 divided by 10/3 is 1. Now, why that form of 1? It has to do with the denominator. Notice if I multiply 3/10 by its reciprocal, 10/3, then in the denominator, when I multiply the denominators together, the 3's reduce, the 10's reduce, and my denominator, instead of being 3/10, has become a 1. Now, of course, if I multiply the denominator by 10/3, I better do the same to the numerator. Otherwise, I'm not multiplying my original fraction by 1. But then my numerator simply becomes 6/5 times 10/3. And when that's divided by 1, why not just write 6/5 times 10/3? And that's the reason that this idea works. It has to do with the denominator becoming 1. Now, in practice, what most students do is they just take 6/5 and multiply it by 10/3. That is, they say, well, I just take the bottom and flip it upside down. And although that's true, it's not mathematically correct in the sense of the vocabulary. So I'll keep talking in the vocabulary of taking reciprocals. All right, try this one. Well, here our numerator is 10/18, and our denominator is -15/24. So if we multiply the numerator by the reciprocal of the denominator, we prime factor the 10 and the -24 and the 18 and the 15 and reduce common factors and multiply the factors left in the numerator and denominator to get a -8/9. And again, whether the negative is in the denominator or out front really doesn't matter. In either case, it's a positive value divided by a negative value, which will give us a negative result since the signs are different. Try this one. Well, in this case, the denominator is thought of as 14/1. So then we take the numerator, multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator, 1/14, prime factor, reduce, multiply the factors that are left, and we get 1/20. Here's another one. When a division problem is written this way, this is considered the denominator. So we think of this as -16/1. Take the reciprocal of the denominator, prime factor, reduce, and end with -12. For this last problem, let's combine multiplication and division. My first step would be to change the 1 6/15 to 21/15. Then, because of the implicit grouping in the numerator, I'd multiply first. After prime factoring and reducing common factors, our numerator would become 7/9. Then, taking the reciprocal of the denominator and multiplying, I'd again prime factor and reduce to get my final quotient of 1/6. Well, that completes our work with dividing fractions, and in the next video we'll move on to adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators.